I was lying in a hospital bed on the second floor of Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany at 6:23 in the morning on a Wednesday in November, with my head wrapped in bandages and a mild traumatic brain injury from an IED shockwave 3 days earlier, when a nurse handed me a manila envelope that had been Federal Expressed from a law firm in Dallas, Texas. I could not, at first, focus my eyes on the words. The nurse, a captain from the medical corps, read the first line for me. She said, "Captain Reeves, this is a divorce petition. Your husband filed it 3 days ago." 3 days ago. I did the math slowly, because my head was still not right. 3 days ago was the same day the IED went off outside my convoy vehicle in Kandahar province, Afghanistan. My husband Marcus had filed for divorce on the exact same day his wife was airlifted to a combat surgical hospital with a bleeding head wound. I set the envelope down on my hospital tray. I did not, at that moment, cry. I could not. The bandages were too tight around my eyes. At 6:47 a.m., the door to my hospital room opened. A woman in an Army service uniform walked in, holding a single sheet of paper. She said, "Captain Reeves, my name is Major Elena Vasquez. I'm a Judge Advocate General Officer. I have been assigned to your case by U.S. Army European Command. I have one document I need to read to you before we discuss your husband's petition. May I proceed?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She read me the one document that ended my husband's plan. The convoy and the injury. My name is Catherine Reeves. My friends call me Kate. I am 36 years old. I am a captain in the United States Army, currently on my 3rd deployment. My specialty is combat intelligence support. My unit was, at the time of this story, attached to the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, operating out of Kandahar Airfield in southern Afghanistan. I have served in the Army for 12 years. I graduated from the University of Virginia in 2013 with a degree in international relations. I entered the Army through ROTC. I was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant on May 18, 2013, at a small ceremony on the lawn at UVA. My father, a retired Marine Corps colonel, pinned my first bars on my collar. He died of pancreatic cancer 3 years later, in 2016. My mother, a retired middle school principal from Charlottesville, Virginia, is my only living immediate family member. I want to tell you about my husband Marcus, because you need to understand him before you understand this story. Marcus Reeves is 39 years old. He is a civilian. He works as a mid-level commercial insurance underwriter at a large firm in Dallas, Texas. We met in 2018, at a wedding in Austin. A friend of mine from UVA was marrying a friend of his from college. I was, at the time, stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, on my 2nd stateside assignment. Marcus was charming. I want to be honest. Marcus was very good at being charming when he wanted to be. He was a mid-Texas kind of charming. Quick smile, big handshake, a comfortable ease at any dinner party in Highland Park or University Park in Dallas. His family owned a small chain of Ford dealerships in East Texas. He had a college degree from SMU. He came from what people in Dallas call old money that isn't old enough to be quiet about it. We married in 2020, at a small ceremony at the chapel at Fort Hood. We did not have children. I want to explain that, because it will matter for what happened next. Marcus and I had, in the first year of our marriage, agreed that we would try to have children when I finished my current deployment cycle. I was scheduled to rotate to a training command at Fort Leavenworth in 2025, a stateside assignment that would keep me in one location for at least 3 years. That would be the time. That was the plan. At least, that was the plan I thought we had agreed to. I deployed to Afghanistan in June of last year. It was my 3rd deployment. The mission was routine, combat intelligence support for the brigade's operations in Kandahar province. My work was, most days, entirely administrative, analyzing signals intelligence, preparing briefings for the brigade commander, coordinating with allied units. I want to describe what happened on the morning of November 17th, because it will matter for the rest of this story. I was riding in the 2nd vehicle of a 5-vehicle convoy, heading to a forward operating base approximately 42 kilometers southwest of Kandahar Airfield. I was in the front passenger seat of an MRAP, a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle. My driver was Specialist James Ortiz, a 22-year-old from El Paso. In the rear seats were 2 junior intelligence analysts. At 8:47 a.m. local time, an improvised explosive device detonated on the shoulder of the road, approximately 6 meters from the right side of our vehicle. The misrap did what MRAPs are designed to do. It absorbed the blast. Everyone in the vehicle survived. Specialist Ortiz sustained minor lacerations to his left forearm. The two analysts in the back sustained mild concussions. I, sitting in the front passenger seat closest to the blast, sustained a significant concussive shockwave to the right side of my head. I do not remember, in detail, the next 4 hours. I remember, in flashes, the medic reaching me. I remember the flight to the combat surgical hospital at Kandahar airfield. I remember, faintly, a doctor saying the word orbital and another doctor saying the word temporal. I remember being intubated. I remember waking up briefly on a C-17 that was flying, I would later learn, from Kandahar to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. I woke up fully at 4 a.m. on November 20th, in a hospital bed on the second floor of Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, the U.S. military's primary hospital in Europe for combat casualties from Afghanistan and Iraq. I had, per the doctor's assessment, a moderate traumatic brain injury from concussive shockwave critical damage to my right ear, partial temporary hearing loss, multiple lacerations on the right side of my face and neck, no fractures, no penetrating injuries, prognosis, full recovery expected in 8 to 12 weeks. I want you to understand something about the way military casualty notification works. When a service member is injured in combat, within 72 hours, the Army's Casualty Assistance Center in Alexandria, Virginia, contacts the service member's designated next of kin. In my case, my designated next of kin was my husband Marcus. Marcus was notified at approximately 11 p.m. Central Time on November 17th, approximately 14 hours after the blast, when the extent of my injuries had been confirmed by the surgical team in Kandahar. Marcus was told, per the standard casualty notification protocol, the following information. Captain Catherine Reeves had been injured in a combat action in Kandahar province. Her injuries were non-life-threatening. She was being evacuated to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany for further treatment. She was expected to make a full recovery. Her husband was invited, at Army expense, to fly to Germany to be with her during her recovery. Marcus was given the phone number of the casualty assistance officer assigned to his case. Marcus did not, in the following 72 hours, call that phone number. Marcus did not, in the following 72 hours, book a flight to Germany. What Marcus did in the following 72 hours is the reason this story exists. The envelope and the JAG officer. I want to walk you through the morning of November 20th, because it is the morning everything changed. I woke up at 4 a.m. Germany time. My head was, per the specific description one of the neurologists had used the previous evening, acquiring itself. I could see, I could hear on my left side, I could think in complete sentences, but my visual focus was fuzzy, and I could not, without significant concentration, remember details from more than a few minutes earlier. The nurse who came in at 5:30 a.m., a captain from the medical corps whose name was Rebecca Chen, helped me sit up in bed. She checked my vital signs. She confirmed that I had eaten dinner. She adjusted the drip in my left arm. She said, "Captain Reeves, I need to give you a piece of mail that arrived for you overnight." I said, "From whom?" Captain Chen looked at the return address on the envelope. She said, "It's from a law firm in Dallas, Texas. Peterson, Bright and Associates. It came Federal Express. It was flagged as time-sensitive." I said, "Captain, I don't think I can focus on words right now. Would you mind reading the first line to me?" Captain Chen opened the envelope. She unfolded the document. She read the first line. She stopped. She read it again. Then she looked at me. She said, "Captain Reeves, this is a divorce petition. Your husband filed it 3 days ago." I did not, for a moment, know what to say. I said, "Captain Chen, what is today's date?" She said, "November 20th. I said, "And what date does the petition say it was filed?" She looked at the header. She said, "November 17th. I said, "Captain Chen, that's the day of my injury." Captain Chen was silent for approximately 4 seconds. Then she said, "Captain Reeves, I need to make a phone call. I am going to leave the petition on your tray. I am going to be back in 10 minutes. Please do not read the document until I return. Is that all right? I said, Captain? Yes. Captain Rebecca Chen left my hospital room at 5:52 a.m. She returned at 6:14 a.m. She was, at that point, accompanied by another officer, a woman in her mid-40s, in Army service uniform, with the specific golden shoulder cord that JAG officers wear on their dress uniform. The name tape on her chest read Vasquez. Her rank was Major. Captain Chen said, Captain Reeves, this is Major Elena Vasquez. She is a Judge Advocate General Officer assigned to U.S. Army European Command Legal Services. I called the JAG duty officer at USARACER 20 minutes ago. Major Vasquez was on call. She was here in 22 minutes. She is here to help you. Major Vasquez stepped forward. She said, Captain Reeves, good morning. May I sit down? I said, ma'am, please. She pulled a chair to the side of my bed. She placed a leather portfolio on her lap. She said, Captain, I want to explain what I am going to do this morning, because your head is still healing, and I want to move at a pace that makes sense for you. Is that all right? I said, ma'am, yes. She said, Captain, I have already read the divorce petition that Captain Chen showed me 20 minutes ago. I have already made 3 phone calls. I have already spoken with the JAG staff at Fort Hood, which is your home duty station, and I have already spoken with a supervising attorney at the law firm in Dallas that filed this petition on behalf of your husband. Do you understand what I am telling you? I said, ma'am, what did you find? Major Vasquez opened her portfolio. She removed a single sheet of paper. She said, Captain, before we discuss the details, I would like to read one document to you. This is not the divorce petition. This is a different document. It is the federal statute known as the Service Members Civil Relief Act, SCRA, specifically Section 202, which governs civil legal proceedings against active duty service members. May I read it to you? I said, please, ma'am. She read, under Section 202 of the Service Members Civil Relief Act, codified at 50 U.S.C. Section 3932, a civil action brought against an active duty service member shall be subject to a mandatory stay of proceedings upon application by the service member or by the court on its own motion, when the service member's ability to appear and defend the action is materially affected by military service. The Act further provides, at Section 201, that any judgment entered against a service member while the service member is on active duty, without proper notification and without appointed counsel, may be set aside as void ab initio, meaning legally void from the moment of filing. She looked up from the paper. She said, Captain Reeves, do you understand what this means? I said, ma'am, I think so, but please explain. Major Vasquez said, Captain, it means that your husband's divorce petition, filed on November 17th, has no legal force. It cannot proceed. It cannot be granted. It cannot even be scheduled for a hearing. Not because of anything I have done, not because of anything you have done, but because the moment your husband's attorney filed that petition in a Texas civil court against a service member who was, at the exact moment of filing, being airlifted from a combat zone with a traumatic brain injury, the petition became legally void. It is a piece of paper that was dead the moment it left the printer. I stared at her. She said, Captain, there is more. I want to tell you what I have already put in motion. May I? I said, ma'am, please. She said, Captain, I have contacted the Texas State Bar this morning. The attorney at Peterson Brighton Associates who filed this petition, a Mr. Douglas Wickham, filed a petition against an active duty servicewoman without conducting the mandatory SCRA verification that Texas civil procedure requires. That is not a minor administrative error. That is a violation of Texas rules of civil procedure and, potentially, a violation of the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct. I have filed a formal complaint against Mr. Wickham on your behalf, with your permission, at 6:03 a.m. this morning. I said, ma'am, yes, you have my permission. Major Vasquez said, Captain, there is one more thing, and this is the part I want you to hear carefully, because it is the reason I came here in person instead of calling. She reached into her portfolio. She removed a second document. She said, Captain, your husband did not simply file a divorce petition. He filed a divorce petition that included specific financial claims. Those claims include an assertion that you have been, quote, financially estranged from the marital household for the past 19 months. That statement is under oath. It is on a document filed with a Texas civil court under penalty of perjury. And it is, per the financial records that JAG has already begun to pull as part of your case, false. I said, ma'am, what do you mean? She said, Captain Reeves, your Army pay for the last 19 months has been direct deposited into a joint checking account you share with your husband. Every dollar of it. Your husband has, per the bank records, personally spent approximately $84,000 of your combat deployment pay in the last 14 months. That is not financial estrangement. That is your husband spending your combat pay while telling a Texas civil court under oath that you have abandoned him financially. I could not for a moment breathe. Major Vasquez said, Captain, your husband's plan was to divorce you while you were in a hospital bed. He believed you would either be too injured to respond or would settle quickly to avoid a public fight. He did not know about the Service Members Civil Relief Act. He did not know that JAG monitors civil filings against active duty service members. And he did not know that when a service member is injured in combat, the entire legal apparatus of the United States Army takes an interest in what happens to that service member at home. She paused. She said, Captain, he is about to find out. I said, ma'am, what happens next? Major Vasquez smiled, for the first time since she had walked into my room. She said, Captain, what happens next is that at 8 a.m. Central Time this morning, which is approximately 47 minutes from now, a JAG officer at Fort Hood is going to deliver a document to your husband's home address in Dallas. That document will inform him that his petition has been declared void ab initio, that a formal complaint has been filed against his attorney with the Texas State Bar, and that a preliminary investigation has been opened by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas into potential federal fraud regarding his misappropriation of your combat deployment pay. Do you understand? I said, ma'am, yes. She said, Captain Reeves, you do not need to do anything today except heal. The Army has this. Do you understand? I said, ma'am, I understand. The consequences. I want to walk you through what happened over the next 72 hours, because it will matter for the rest of this story. At 8:03 a.m. Central Time on November 20th, Captain David Morrison, a JAG officer at Fort Hood, knocked on the front door of my house on Preston Road in Dallas, Texas. He was accompanied by a second uniformed officer and a civilian process server. Marcus opened the door. He was, per the process server's later notes, wearing pajamas at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday, which meant he had not gone to work. Captain Morrison handed him 3 documents. Document 1, a formal notice from JAG informing Marcus that his November 17th divorce petition had been declared void ab initio under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and that any attempt to refile during my active duty service, including my recovery period, which under Army regulation would extend for a minimum of 90 days post-injury, would be subject to immediate federal injunction. Document 2, a formal notice from the Texas State Bar informing Marcus that a complaint had been filed against his attorney Douglas Wickham and that Marcus was required to preserve all communications with Wickham for the duration of the investigation. Document 3, a formal notice from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas informing Marcus that a preliminary investigation had been opened into potential violations of federal law regarding misuse of a deployed service member's compensation, and that Marcus was required to preserve all financial records related to our joint checking account. Marcus, per Captain Morrison's notes, went very pale. He said, "There must be some mistake." Captain Morrison said, "Sir, there is no mistake. Please sign the receipt acknowledging service." Marcus signed the receipt. Captain Morrison and the process server left. Marcus called my hospital room at 4:47 p.m., Germany time, approximately 8 hours later. I did not answer. He called again at 5:12 p.m. I did not answer. He called 7 more times over the next 4 hours. I did not answer. At 11 p.m. Germany time, Major Vasquez visited my hospital room. She had at that point been on my case for approximately 17 hours. She said, "Captain, your husband has been calling both your cell phone and this hospital's main line for the last 8 hours. He has left 7 voicemails on the hospital line. He has been informed by the hospital operator that patient communications are being screened. Do you want me to review the voicemails and provide you with a summary? I said, "Ma'am, please." She played the voicemails on her tablet. The first voicemail, 5:12 p.m., Germany time, began with the phrase, "Catherine, I don't know what has happened, but there has been a terrible misunderstanding." The second voicemail, 5:47 p.m., began with, "Catherine, please, some army lawyer came to our house. I need to explain what happened." By the fourth voicemail, Marcus was crying. By the sixth voicemail, Marcus was blaming his attorney. By the seventh voicemail, 10:14 p.m., Germany time, Marcus said the sentence that ended any possibility of my ever speaking to him again. He said, "Catherine, if you don't call me back, I am going to have to tell the JAG people that you signed the divorce papers before you deployed. Do you understand what I am saying?" Major Vasquez stopped the tablet. She looked at me. She said, "Captain Reeves, your husband just threatened, on a recorded hospital line, to commit felony perjury. I would like your permission to add that voicemail to the JAG case file." "Do I have your permission?" I said. "Ma'am, yes." She added the voicemail to the case file. "I want to tell you the rest, quickly, because the details past this point are, in some ways, less important than what happened in that hospital room over those 2 days." Marcus was arrested by federal agents on December 4th on charges of wire fraud, misappropriation of service member compensation, and violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. He was, additionally, referred for state prosecution in Texas for perjury based on his sworn statement in the divorce petition. His attorney, Douglas Wickham, voluntarily surrendered his law license on January 18th. Marcus's family, the Reeves family in East Texas, did not, per what I later learned through mutual friends, hire an attorney to defend him. His father, a 71-year-old retired car dealer, apparently told Marcus over Christmas dinner in 2024, "You divorced a wounded soldier while she was on a hospital gurney. I have no help to give you." Marcus pled guilty to the federal charges on February 3rd. He was sentenced to 14 months in federal prison and ordered to repay $84,000 in restitution to me for the deployment pay he had spent. He served the 14 months at a low-security federal facility in Bastrop, Texas. He is, at the time I am telling you this story, 10 months into his supervised release. The affair, because there was, of course, an affair, came out during the federal investigation. Her name was Danielle Whitmore. She was 33 years old. She was a mortgage loan officer at a bank in Plano, Texas. She had been sleeping with Marcus for approximately 11 months before I deployed. She had, per the phone records the FBI pulled, spent 143 nights at my house on Preston Road in the 14 months of my deployment. She had also, per the same records, been present in the house on the day the Army casualty officer called Marcus to inform him of my injury. Marcus had, according to Danielle's own testimony to federal investigators, told her that he was planning to file for divorce as soon as Catherine got herself killed in Afghanistan, so we don't have to split the assets. Marcus was informed of my injury at 11 p.m. Central Time on November 17th. He walked into Peterson Bright and Associates the next morning at 9:15 a.m. He filed the divorce petition at 2:47 p.m. that afternoon. Between the phone call and the filing, Marcus and Danielle had approximately 15 and a half hours to decide what to do. They decided to file. I recovered fully from my TBI over the next 4 months. My hearing in my right ear returned by January. My visual focus returned by early December. My cognitive function was, per the neurologist's final assessment in April, consistent with pre-injury baseline. I returned to duty at Fort Hood on March 15th. Major Elena Vasquez, the JAG officer who had walked into my hospital room at 6:47 a.m. on November 20th, became my friend. She was, at the time, 43 years old. She had been a JAG officer for 16 years. She had, per what she told me over coffee at Fort Hood in April, worked on approximately 11 cases similar to mine during her career. I asked her, at that coffee, whether she thought Marcus had planned this before I deployed. She said, "Captain, I don't have to guess." His attorney's billing records show that Marcus began consulting Peterson, Bright and Associates about a potential divorce in March of last year, which was 3 months before your deployment. I said, "Elena, why didn't he file then?" Major Vasquez set down her coffee. She said, "Catherine, Because in March you were still alive at home, and divorcing a healthy servicewoman at home is expensive. He was waiting for a better opportunity. I said, Elena, my death would have been the better opportunity. Major Vasquez said, Catherine, yes. After I want to tell you what happened over the next 14 months, because it matters. I was promoted to major on my birthday in June. The promotion was not, per Army standards, unusual. I had been on the list for promotion since before my deployment, but the timing felt like something my father would have appreciated. General David Whitcomb, the deputy commander of 3rd Corps at Fort Hood, pinned my new rank on my collar himself at a small ceremony in the Officers Club. My mother flew in from Charlottesville for the ceremony. She was 71. She was the last living person who had known me before I put on a uniform. She sat in the front row of the ceremony in a navy blue suit she had bought for my father's memorial service in 2016. She cried through the entire ceremony. Afterward, at the small reception, she pulled me aside. She said, Catherine, your father would have said something exactly right at this moment, and I don't know what it would have been, but I know he would have said it. I said, Mama, he would have said, you earned every one of those oak leaves the hard way, and you kept them. She smiled. She said, yes, that is what he would have said. I sold the house on Preston Road in September. I could not, after everything, sleep in a house where another woman had spent 143 nights. I bought a smaller house, a 3-bedroom craftsman-style bungalow on a quiet street in Belton, Texas, about 12 miles from Fort Hood. I have, in the year I have lived there, planted a rose garden in the backyard. Major Vasquez helped me plant the first bushes. My mother visits every 3 months and helps me weed them. I have not, in the 15 months since Marcus was released from federal prison, spoken to him. He has, per his supervised release conditions, been legally prohibited from contacting me. He is required, per the terms of his federal probation, to complete a domestic violence education course, which the federal system has decided applies to his case because, per the sentencing judge's specific finding, filing a fraudulent divorce petition against a wounded service member constitutes psychological abuse of an incapacitated spouse. Marcus has, per what I have been told through mutual friends, moved to a small apartment in Waco, Texas. He works, when he can find work, at a small used car lot. He has not, per what my attorney reports, made any of the court-ordered restitution payments. I do not need the money. My mother's small inheritance, my father's Marine pension survivor benefit, my Army compensation, and the sale of the Preston Road house have left me, at 37, in a financially stable position I would never have imagined at 24. What Marcus took from me was not money. What Marcus took from me was the 15.5 hours he spent, between the phone call about my injury and the divorce filing, deciding that a woman with a bleeding head wound in a combat surgical hospital was worth less to him than the paperwork he needed to move on with his life. That is what he took. And the answer, per Major Elena Vasquez and the entire legal apparatus of the United States Army, is that he does not get to take that from anyone else. Major Vasquez is, at the time I am telling you this story, teaching a course at the Army JAG School in Charlottesville, Virginia, my hometown, on the application of the Service Members Civil Relief Act to combat casualty cases. Her course is required, per Army JAG policy, for every JAG officer who will handle casualty assistance during their career. The course opens with a single case study. The case study is mine. The first sentence of the case study reads, on November 17th at 8:47 a.m. local time in Kandahar province, Afghanistan, an improvised explosive device detonated near a U.S. Army convoy. Within 15 hours, a divorce petition was filed against the injured service member in a Texas civil court. The following case examines the legal, ethical, and human failures that made that filing possible, and the statutory framework that made it fail. Major Vasquez sent me a copy of the syllabus in October. I framed it. It hangs in the small office of my Belton bungalow, next to my father's Marine dress sword, and a photograph of my rose garden. Below the frame, in a smaller frame, is a copy of the single sheet of paper Major Vasquez read to me at 6:47 a.m. on November 20th, in my hospital bed at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center. It is the text of Section 202 of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. I read it, sometimes, when the memory of that hospital room comes back to me at 4 a.m., It reminds me that in the specific hour when I was most alone in my life, bandaged, sedated, 4,700 miles from home, the country I had served for 12 years sent a woman in a service uniform to sit beside my hospital bed and read me the statute that protected me. That is what a country is supposed to do. That is what my country did. If you have ever been the service member, or the family of a service member, who came home from a deployment to a life that had been decided while you were gone, I want you to leave one word in the comments below. Just one word. The name of the country you deployed to, or the name of the hospital where you woke up, or the name of the person who read you the piece of paper that protected you when nobody else did. Say the word. Because someone in this comment section is going to see your word, and they are going to remember that the person who shows up at your hospital bed at 6:47 in the morning is, very often, the only person in the room who knows what you have earned. And if this story reminded you that the law protects the people who serve, subscribe, because next week, I am telling you about a mother-in-law who mocked my medals in front of my daughter. A 2-star general knocked on her door the next morning. I'll see you there.